Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Geometry Just-in-Time presentation today. This is Mike Traylor with the Office of Student Assessment at the Virginia Department of Education. Tina Mazzacane, the K-12 Mathematics Coordinator, is also joining us from the Office of STEM and Innovation at the Virginia Department of Education. Before we begin, I would like to go over a few logistics with all of you. All participants have been muted and individual videos have been disabled for this presentation. Should you have any questions, we would like you to submit your questions to the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. If you will just take a few seconds now, you can hover at the bottom of the screen, you will see the Q&A, and you will see a chat feature. When you would like to submit your questions, we'd like for you to do that through the Q&A. You can hover near the bottom of the shared screen, and you will see the Q&A icon. VDOE staff will be monitoring the Q&A and will respond to your questions throughout the webinar. The Geometry Just-in-Time PowerPoint and a recorded version of this webinar will be posted soon on the Just-in-Time webpage. Many of the quick checks for geometry have already been posted to the Just-in-Time webpage. Various links will be shared with all of you at specific times during the presentation tonight. All the links that we share will be through the chat feature, which is found also at the bottom of the screen. When accessing the link in the chat feature, please make sure you download the document so that you can view any of the graphics that are contained within those documents. We are aware that you will probably have many questions regarding the quick checks. During our presentation, our presenters will be sharing ideas of the use of quick checks regarding planning, identifying supporting SOL, formative assessment, and pre-assessment. Since many of you are teaching virtually, or in some sort of hybrid model this year, the presenters will be offering ideas for how these quick checks can be used in a virtual environment. Stay tuned, and our presenters will share these great ideas with all of you. Just-in-time mathematics quick checks are formative assessments that align to the 2016 Mathematics Standards of Learning. These resources, developed by Virginia teachers and mathematics leaders, are designed to help teachers identify students with unfinished learning and assist in planning instruction to fill potential gaps just in time. Our guest facilitators and leaders who are instrumental in this work will facilitate this session today and provide additional information about the just-in-time quick checks and their potential use in the classroom. It is my privilege and pleasure to introduce our presenters today. We have Dr. Angela Bird-Wright. Dr. Angela Bird-Wright is the mathematics curriculum leader for Hampton City Schools, beginning her 17th year as an educator. Dr. Bird-Wright has worked in Hampton City Schools for 10 years, serving as a math coach and a middle school principal. She worked as a division secondary mathematics teacher specialist before becoming the mathematics curriculum leader. She has also been a principal with Franklin City Public Schools, an assistant principal in Gloucester County, and taught secondary mathematics in Newport News. She was recently a co-presenter for the Ed Equity Virginia Department of Education webinar series on the COVID-19 slide, sharing strategies on how to mitigate learning loss in mathematics. We're also very pleased and proud to have Rebecca Hall with us tonight. Rebecca Hall currently serves as the instructional liaison and as a mathematics teacher at Code RVA Regional High School, a blended learning school with a focus on computer science located in Richmond. Prior to serving at Code RVA, she worked for Chesterfield County Public Schools as a high school mathematics teacher and then as the interim instructional specialist in the secondary mathematics office. She recently served on the VDOE Continuity for Learning Task Force and helped with content acquisition for the Go Open Virginia initiative. It is my pleasure now to turn over this presentation to Dr. Angela Bird-Wright and Rebecca Hall, and we are so pleased to have everyone join us tonight, and these two are going to rock this out, so get ready.
Thank you so much, Mike. And I am really honored to be here with Rebecca Hall. We have worked together on the just-in-time quick checks for the previous iteration with grades 7 through Algebra 1. And we know that this is going to be so worthwhile for you as geometry teachers to be able to use these critical resources during such a time as this to help your students move forward. And so let's talk about today's agenda. So first, we're going to talk about the Recover, Redesign, and Restart 2020 plan. We're going to talk about when to use quick checks, the components of a quick check, how to use those quick checks, using the quick checks in a virtual environment. As Mike stated, many of us are in some sort of blended or hybrid or concurrent model, or and some of us are still in a 100% virtual learning environment. So that is going to be a key takeaway from today's presentation. We're going to talk about the availability of our quick checks, and then some additional resources and support that can be found with the just-in-time quick checks. Again, as a reminder, we want you to place any questions that you have in that Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. So for those who might have just come in a little bit late, we just want to give you an opportunity to look at the bottom of your screen. You're going to see that Q&A feature where you can pose questions, and members of the VDOE team, along with Rebecca and I, will be answering some of those questions as we go forward. And then specialized links and specific links during the presentation will be dropped in the chat box. All right, so let's talk about Recover, Redesign, Restart 2020. I believe it's got over 182 pages. I believe it's close to that. And I'm sure many of you have already been so familiar with it, as it was used as the template or your foundational way to begin to think about how school will look differently during the 2021 school year. So as you can maybe recall, on June the 9th, Governor Northam announced a phased reopening plan for Virginia schools. And during this press conference, Dr. Lane, our superintendent of schools, shared the guidance document for Recover, Redesign, and Restart 2020. In our division, we like to fondly refer to as the R3 plan. Preparing and planning for instruction and assessment. These are the key components of that guidance document. And in it, we pulled out a particular nugget that really was the impetus for us moving into those just-in-time quick checks. And it states, assessment should not be interpreted to mean a testing event, but rather a process of data collection that's ongoing, formative, and low or no stakes. Assessment should include just-in-time formative assessments that inform immediate instructional needs. And so with that being the case, the mathematics staff from the Office of Student Assessment and the Office of STEM Innovation at VDOE, and this project has been extensive with more than 50 mathematics teachers and mathematics leaders, supervisors throughout the Commonwealth, collaborated to develop exactly what was written there in the R3 plan, just-in-time quick checks to assist teachers in identifying students' unfinished learning while still moving forward with current grade level content. And you all are going to truly be blown a bit away by the components of the quick checks and the various uses that you can use to implement them with your students or grade level teams. And so what is a quick check? Well, a quick check is exactly what it says it is. It's a resource that generally includes 3 or more questions that are each designed to reveal some common misconceptions or student errors when learning the content that's addressed by a standard and bullet. What's been so great about the quick checks is specific to the bullet. So you're not just going to see G.3. You're going to see a just-in-time quick check specifically aligned to each of those sub-bullets within that overarching standard, which is phenomenal because you can really target and have a laser focus on the skills that you know that there may be some skill gaps that students may have as you're addressing some vertical articulation pieces within your school division. But also to keep in mind that we did not tackle every single misconception. You know, when you're working in your classroom, students can exhibit 4, 5, 6 misconceptions. But we address those top 2 to 3 misconceptions that students may have that are more prevalent or pervasive, so that we really get to the heart of the matter of that standard to really, again, move students forward, but really targeting in and having a laser focus on what that standard is asking students to do. And so right now, I'm getting ready to turn it over to my partner, Rebecca Hall, and she's going to take it away from here.
Thank you, Dr. Birdwright. I'm Rebecca Hall, and I'm excited to be here. We're gonna keep going. So the quick check content, right? So we have created quick checks, not we, but the team, right, of 50 educators have created quick checks from kindergarten through Algebra 2. So we did a similar webinar a couple months back for 7 through Algebra 1 teachers, and the first question that people kept asking in the chat was, when are we gonna have these for geometry? When are we gonna have these for Algebra 2? So as soon as those webinars ended, the VDOE team brought together another group of us to continue working on them so we could go all the way through Algebra 2. So this was based off of requests from maybe some of you, if you attended those webinars through Algebra 1, or your colleagues. They all saw the value, and so we went ahead and did geometry in Algebra 2, which is great because they all have the same format, they all look the same, so when you go back to look at a previous grade levels, it's going to look just like the ones that you have for geometry. All right, so what are quick checks going to do, right? So they're going to help us as teachers re-engage students in prerequisite knowledge within the context of grade level learning experiences, right? So we're teaching geometry. I'm teaching geometry right now too. So we're all teaching geometry, but we can use these quick checks to help us with some of that prerequisite knowledge that they might have, okay? We're going to remain focused though on teaching geometry, right? The learning that we're doing today, the content that we're working with students on today. Okay, we're not just going to always be thinking about catching students up, but we're teaching our current content, and then we can use these quick checks to help scaffold where appropriate and where needed for students moving forward. Okay, so we're going to use them just in time, right? In the moment versus just in case. And I'll go over some examples of what that means in a moment as well. Okay. Quick checks are also going to help us identify those gaps, right? And that scaffolding that we talked about just in time, and respond in real time, right? So they're quick, that's the whole point. So we can get that immediate feedback and then use that immediately to address the needs of our students, modify our instruction, provide extra examples, or if students are doing well, just move them forward and continue on with the content. Okay, so here's a little bit deeper dive into just in case versus just in time. Okay, so the example here is the SOL G.8a, right? So the students will solve problems, including practical problems involving right triangles, which includes applying the Pythagorean theorem and its converse. So just in case example, Mrs. Jones includes a reteaching lesson on the application of Pythagorean theorem. So for an entire class block, all of her geometry students do a lesson on Pythagorean theorem, right? We don't know. Maybe her students already remember Pythagorean theorem. Maybe they just needed 1 or 2 examples to reactivate that prior knowledge, right? So there's no data to kind of demonstrate the need for this lesson, okay? So we want to be more purposeful and intentional with our teaching and learning, especially in this time when we all know we have limited time with students, we're figuring out virtual, blended, all these different learning models. So we really need to be hyper-focused on what students need. So that's why we're going to look at using quick checks just in time. Okay, so the just in time example here, same standard, right? But instead of doing an entire lesson for all the students, Mrs. Rodriguez identifies students who have unfinished learning by implementing a quick check of content from SOL 8.9 prior to introducing right triangle trigonometry and properties of special right triangles. Okay, so instead of using, again, a whole lesson and reteaching content that students may not need, right, we're just going to do a 10-minute quick check, right, and to identify what students do need additional reinforcement, what students are ready to move forward, what students might need a little mini lesson on the side, what examples might we incorporate into our lesson on grade level content, okay? And what's really nice about the quick checks is you see it refers here to SOL 8.9b, and you might be worried, like, how do I know what SOL I should look at, right? If you're teaching geometry, you might not be familiar with the middle school standards, okay? But right in the quick check, it's there for you. So you don't have to worry about researching what SOL I should look at. When we go over the components, you'll see that it's right there listed what prior standards are supporting or prerequisite SOLs to help you guide instruction. So we're going to use these just in time to help all of our students. Okay, so now where do we find these amazing resources? Right, on the VDOE website, of course. So there's a logo there. If you go, you'll see that just in time, that little kid with the tablet in front of him. And they're on both the math site and the assessment site, the standards of learning and testing site. Okay, so when you go there, you will see all the quick checks for all grade levels. Okay, so there's a banner at the top, of course. It's got the intro. It has the resources. So if you, the recorded webinar will be posted there eventually, so you can use that to share with colleagues who maybe couldn't join us today. And then you're gonna pick geometry, right? Because you're a geometry teacher. So we wanna focus on our grade level content. Okay, so we're gonna pick geometry as we look for quick checks. And then, like we've talked about, every standard is there in each bullet. So you can see for G.5, there's an A, a B, a C, and a D. So every bullet has its own quick check, its own set of problems that you can use. Okay, and then you can see some of them are already available, right? Anything that's in red is hyperlinked, it's ready to go. You can access the Word version or the PDF version, okay? And then the ones that are in black text, right, they're not yet hyperlinked, those are in the works. Right, so they're in their final review, and then they've got to get them loaded to the website. So they're coming. So continue to look back, and there'll be more and more updates. They've been created. It's just the final revision process needs to take place. So they will all be there soon. Okay, so how are we going to use this? Right, so teachers are going to use quick checks while teaching, again, grade level content. Right, we're geometry teachers. That's what we're responsible for helping students learn. Okay, so we can use them, look at that quick check, and help identify and access the supporting and prerequisite SOLs. That's where it's going to refer back to some 7th and 8th grade standards that you might not know are related to geometry, but the quick check will give you that information. Okay, the quick check will also help us with considering the most common student errors and misconceptions. Right, again, we can enumerate every misconception students have, but based on our experiences, we identified the most common student errors and what that might indicate about student learning. We can use quick checks as we're planning, and we'll walk you through an example of what that might look like tonight. Okay, we can use quick checks as a quick assessment, right? They're called quick checks, right? So just like that just-in-time example, instead of teaching a whole lesson, we can use a quick check to kind of assess our current content. Right, so if you're teaching properties of triangles right now, you can pull out those quick checks, the G5 ones, and use those tomorrow, right, to quickly assess how our students doing with the content we're teaching on grade level, but then also help us identify all those resources. So if you find, oh, my students need some additional practice, I need to go and find another resource, those are going to be available in the quick check, which is amazing that they're all in one place. So you don't have to go find 800 different websites. Go to the quick check page and everything will be there for the standard and bullet you're teaching. Okay, and how are we not going to use quick checks? Right, so quick checks are not intended to be a pre-assessment, right, for a unit or semester or course. That wouldn't be just in time, right? That would be at the beginning. Right, we want to use them, you can use them as a formative little pre-assessment in that lesson, right, just in time, but we're not going to collect them all, those questions, and give them to students in advance. They're certainly not a practice SOL test. You'll notice most all of the quick check questions are open-ended and require some type of explain your thinking. How do you know within their question, right? Because we really want to get to what students understand. Right? What are they thinking and how are they coming up with their answer and what process are they using? So they're open-ended questions, not designed to be a practice SOL. Okay, there's certainly not a packet right? The purpose of quick checks is for that formative feedback to help students and to help yourself drive your instruction and make intentional decisions on what you're doing in our time with students. So we're not going to give them a packet where there's no feedback to them or for you on how you can use that in real time. They're not to be graded, right? They're formative just to kind of guide our instruction and see where students are with their learning. And they're definitely not going to be used to determine course placement. You know, if you give a quick check and say, oh, you're not ready for geometry, you can't be in here. We're not going to do that to students, of course. If they're in our geometry class, we're going to teach them, meet them where they are, and move them forward. And then I think I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Woodwright. We're going to go through a quick check on all the parts so you can see kind of everything listed.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. At this time, members of the team, they're going to be dropping in the quick check that we're going to be examining a little bit further and a little bit detail so you can just get a gist of what the just-in-time quick checks are about. So you're going to be receiving a link to G.7. So we're going to be delving into triangle similarity tonight. Who's excited about that? We're going right on into that. And we're going to talk about the components of the quick check. So at this point, you're going to be looking down on your taskbar at the bottom in the chat box, and you're going to be receiving that. So we'll give you a moment to get there. All right, so let's talk about the components of the quick check. Each quick check will contain links to the curriculum framework. It has the questions that are designed to reveal those possible student errors and misconceptions. As you've heard us speak about that again, just to identify that those misconceptions or student errors, we did not do all of them, but we again focused in on those top ones that we know are prevalent with that particular content. We've also provided teacher notes for each question, and you all will love the teacher notes. I can tell you as a developer, along with Rebecca can certainly chime in on this one, it was harder to write the teacher notes than the questions because you really had to think backwards and map backwards about the way that you wanted that question to be worded. So we actually wrote those teacher notes first, but those are such a powerful tool and we can't wait for you to see those. And then the quick checks have the components of the supporting resources and those supporting and prerequisite SOLs aligned to that particular standard. So let's look at the front page of the first page of your quick check. Each component offers a unique element of support to the content of the standard, and we're going to look at each portion of the quick check. First, you'll see at the top, you're going to have a link that has the standard of learning, which will take you directly to the geometry mathematics curriculum framework. So as Rebecca shared, you're not having to hunt and gather. Those links are right there. It's kind of one-stop shopping right there that you can use to get to those supporting documents and resources that are aligned to the VDOE resources that we have on the current website. Next, you're going to see the strand, and the strand that we're looking at today deals with triangles. You'll also have the standard of learning that is there in bold along with those sub-bullets. So the standard we're looking at tonight, we're going to be looking at given information in the form of a figure or statement will prove two triangles are similar. And so then those sub-bullets there are also provided. Proving two triangles similar, given relationships, looking at relationships and representations in the coordinate plane and using coordinate methods, and then of course using some direct proofs to prove triangles similar. You'll see two other links that are provided as well. One to the just-in-time quick check. So when you happen to click on that, it's going to actually move you down to the student portion of those questions that have been asked in the quick check. And then secondly, you're going to see the just-in-time quick check teacher notes. So these items are bookmarked within the just-in-time quick check. Next, you're going to see those supporting resources. Those supporting resources include mathematics instructional plans, both the Word and PDF version, the Word wall cards. And it's not just the link to the Word wall cards. As you know, there's countless words that you can really have in those word wall cards, but the ones that are specific to that bullet, which I think is great. When you even think about maybe your newer teachers, or maybe haven't taught geometry in a while, or just moving from one content to the next, that's going to be great, because we know, especially with geometry, it is a very vocabulary rich content in mathematics, and you've really got to know it. And so those word wall cards are delineated there for you, specific to that content. Then you're going to see some other resources. For the example that we have here, there was not a Desmos activity aligned to it, but if so, you would see the Desmos activity and any other VDOE resources, which could include instructional videos, instructional modules. You'll also see some references to eMedia VA. Some of you have used that through WHRO. And so those particular modules that are aligned to that particular standard are also included. Next, you're going to see those supporting and prerequisite SOLs, and that is the vertical articulation piece that we referred to a little bit earlier in tonight's presentation, and that is those prerequisite SOLs. You're not having to hunt and gather and try to figure out what those foundational skills are, because they've already been mapped using one of the tools I'm sure that many of you have used before, and that is the VMAT tool. And so that was used, as well as working with the lead developers, members of the VDOE team, to really ensure that we could see those content connections. I'm sure there could be others, but in most cases you will see in the just-in-time quick checks that the grade level, we would tend to go about 2 grade levels back. However, with geometry, you will see some exceptions. For example, with geometry, you're going to see some links to 7th grade standards, because that's the last place where there was a connection to some of your current learning. So do not be alarmed, because they are right there for you, and you're going to see some of those pieces as we give you some scenarios moving forward. And speaking of that, that's right on time. Here we go with some scenarios. We've got 4. I'm going to do the first 2, and then Rebecca's going to do the other 2. First, let's think about planning. Planning is that launch pad from where we need to go to that implementation of instruction. So we're going to start there. So many of you are probably in collaborative learning teams in your school division. That's what we call them, CLTs, in our school division in Hampton. And so think about it. You're sitting with your team of teachers on your team, your content planning team, and you're getting ready to prepare to teach G.7. So you quickly analyze and say, all right, we're going to where Rebecca told us to go. I attended that just-in-time quick check presentation. I now know to go to the VDOE website and find the just-in-time quick checks link, and I'm going to find G.7 on the DOE website. And this is going to provide them with quick access to the knowledge and skills that are expected at geometry, as well as give some insight into what is expected from previous grade levels of those prerequisite skills. So first, in looking, they study as a CLT and say, all right, look, I'm looking at this particular strand. I know it's from the triangle strand, my standard of learning, and what's expected of the students. And I have immediate access to the curriculum framework, the standards, and the bullets for G.7. Again, one-stop shopping is right there at your fingertips. Now, they've decided, as they look at the standard, that students would have learned at previous grade levels. They're going to select, in particular, though, 7.5. You're going to see why in a minute. The quick check for 7.5 reveals that in grade 7, students are solving problems, including practical problems, that involve those relationships between exactly what we need when we're looking at similarity: corresponding sides and corresponding angles, not only of quadrilaterals, but of triangles in particular. So that's where that grade level team or content area team is going to stay focused and looking at those questions in particular that pertain to triangles. In so doing, they also find that with the quick check for 7.5, that students are expected to identify corresponding sides, congruent angles, write similarity statements. So think about that when you're thinking about those direct proofs. Writing the similarity statements, writing proportions, understanding proportionality, solving proportions to determine a missing side length, or determining an unknown angle measure of similar figures. So there's a lot going on with that particular standard that really is critical or crucial to students' understanding of G.7. So now the next scenario we're going to be looking at is identifying what those supporting SOLs are from prior grade levels to support the current learning. So let's take Mrs. Lovings. Mrs. Lovings, she is getting ready to lovingly teach her students SOL G.7, and she notices some students are consistently demonstrating errors or those misconceptions in understanding. So she decides to look at 7.5 to access the grade 7 questions, and she clicks on those just-in-time quick checks links. She uses some of the questions, and I repeat, some of the questions, not all, to identify some areas of unfinished learning for her students. So as she does a review, she decides to use 2 questions. You're going to find through some of these scenarios that you might not even use all of the questions to ascertain students' understanding of content, but things that are specific to the misconceptions or errors that you might see during your daily instruction of students, which again is a powerful thing. So Mrs. Lovings in this situation, she decides to use just 2 questions from the quick check for 7.5. So she looks at questions 1B and 1D as her students are struggling with identifying corresponding sides of similar triangles. And because of this, they're unable to determine proportionality. So let's look at one of those questions and see what could be the issue. So first, she begins with question 1B. And in looking at this particular question, you notice here you're looking at triangle LMN is similar to triangle JKH. And so students in this particular question are asked to just complete the similarity statement or understand or connect the corresponding sides. So in doing, this may indicate if students are still incorrectly identifying those corresponding sides, this indicates that students might not understand corresponding parts of similar triangles, which is critical to being able to identify if or prove if triangles are similar, and then may support Mrs. Lovings can then use this information to support students by possibly having them to color code or to number the corresponding sides before completing each statement. Next, we move on to question 1D. Again, we're using these same 2 triangles, but again, looking at the proportionality here to express the relationship between the corresponding sides. So in looking at this question, you've got to be able to set up the proportion correctly to determine the correspondence. So the responses to this question will reveal whether students can write or if they have a hard time determining the proportionality, because they may have an error in writing the reciprocal of the second ratio. And I'll flip back to that so you can see it, visualize that, okay? And this may indicate that some students are placing those corresponding sides diagonally because they may be thinking ahead to what? That cross multiplication to set up the proportion. So Mrs. Lovings may then decide she's going to help her students by helping them write similarity statements, numbering the corresponding parts so you can see how those 2 questions are connected, right? And then modeling how to set up the proportions by following a particular pattern with the students to help them, for example, going from either the smaller figure to the larger figure or vice versa. So that's just an example of how to use those foundational standards quick checks to help with the current learning and identifying some of those misconceptions and errors. I'm going to turn it over now to Rebecca to pick up on scenarios 3 and 4.
All right, so scenario 3 is formative assessment. Okay, so in this situation, right, Mr. Sellers provided instruction on G.7 yesterday. Right, so students explored proving 2 triangles similar given the relationships among angles and sides of triangles expressed numerically and algebraically. Okay, so that's what we do, right? We provide geometry instruction, right? And then we can use that quick check the next day, right, as a warm-up, right? To kind of see, how do students understand? Are they, where do we still need some further instruction? How are students doing with the content that we taught them the previous day? That might be how you do this for a formative assessment. So he accesses the quick check, right? And again, you have the choice, right? So they are a Word format as well as the PDF. So if you use that Word format, you can pick and choose and edit as needed, right? So he might just select question 1 as a warm-up. Okay, so students are entering class or logging into their Google Meet or Zoom, wherever you're meeting your students, as they're joining, right, you might provide them this warm-up question, right? And so as students are responding, those responses are going to let Mr. Sellers know what students might need additional support, right, to help them kind of understand those associating corresponding sides. Also the comparison to part whole and whole, right, within those overlapping triangles there, right? So there's some great information he can kind of gather from students right in the moment to help him as he's working on today's lesson, right? So he knows kind of how did they do yesterday? How can I use that information to guide my instruction today? What additional examples might I need to include as we're working in class? Okay, and then again, for that formative, just quick, where are my students? What supports do I need to provide? Which students understand and are ready to move forward, and which students might need a little mini lesson, a little extra support. Mr. Sellers uses questions 5 and 6 at the end of his lesson, right? So you could use them as an exit ticket. You can use them in the middle of the lesson, whatever works best for you. So let's look at questions 5 and 6 that he might use at the end of the lesson, right? And these questions are more focused on proving triangles similar, right? So we've practiced our corresponding sides and identifying those. Now we're going to go into proving similarity, okay? So student responses to this particular question 5, will help Mr. Sellers know which students have the misconception that the given triangles are not similar because they're congruent. And students might see that and say, oh, those are congruent, okay, so they can't be similar. So this will kind of help him know, right, that they might not be looking at that scale factor of 1 and using that for their corresponding side, setting up that proportion. Okay, and then the other question he might use at the end, right, after he's provided some more instruction on proving triangles similar, is question 3. And this is definitely a higher level question because this is the like, what else do you need to know question, right? So what additional information is needed to prove the triangles are similar? Okay, so Mr. Sellers would use this higher level question to assess whether students can determine the additional information, right? This will help him know which students really understand the corresponding sides are proportional, right? And also looking at that included angle, depending on what sides they use, what additional piece of information they give will help us know, do students understand where that included angle has to be between those two sides, right? So those are great questions that are on the quick check, right? That as you're providing instruction to students, you can use either in a formative way at the beginning of the lesson or in a formative way at the end of the lesson or in the middle of the lesson, right? Because it'll help us kind of drive our instruction. Okay, and then this particular question is a proof, right? A 2-column proof. So maybe you save that one. So Mr. Sellers is going to save this question and use it when it's appropriate, maybe in the next day or 2, right? So you don't have to use all the questions on a quick check in one class period. You get to pick and choose how best to use those questions to help support your knowledge about where your students are in their learning. Okay, and then here's another one too that you might save, right? The graphing question, which refers back to distance formula and slope. And I mean, there's multiple layers here. So this might be a whole lesson on its own, right? Using the coordinate plane for similar triangles. Okay, another way you might use them, right? The final scenario we have here is a pre-assessment. Okay, and this is where Mrs. Byers, right, is concerned that students may have gaps in prior learning. So she's going to teach G.7, right? We're focusing on similar triangles. She knows she's going to do that today, right? But she wants to kind of reactivate their prior knowledge. They've learned about similar triangles before. So what do students remember? How can I use that information to help drive my lesson? Okay, so as a bell ringer warm up, she doesn't use G.7's questions. She uses 7.5 questions, right? And we've talked about and showed you how on that quick check, you can go to the supporting prerequisite SOL. So you go to G7, you see 7.5 at the bottom, you look at those questions and you're like, oh, 4 and 5, let's use those, or 4A and 4B, let's use those, because it'll help me gauge what my students might remember and help activate their prior knowledge. Okay, so here's a question from the 7A quick check, right? set up a proportion to represent the relationship between the corresponding sides to find the length of OT. Okay, so she can use this question to kind of determine, do they remember how to set up the proportion? Do they remember what the corresponding sides look like? All of this information, right? To kind of say, this is something you learned in 7th grade, but let me see as your teacher what you do remember and where I can support you just in time versus teaching the whole class a lesson on something where students might remember this information. They might not, they might be ready to move forward. Okay. And then question 4B was, what is the length of OT, right? So finding that value of the missing side. So same picture, it's not going to take you hours of class time, right? I know all of our time with our students is so valuable. So we really want to make sure we're using it appropriately to kind of select those right questions to use at the right moment to give us the feedback we need to help move students forward. Okay, so she's using, again, the quick check to gauge the amount of background knowledge they have as she's introducing new content. Okay, it's an opportunity to reactivate prior knowledge, recall some of that vocabulary, right? As you're going over that warm-up question, you might ask students might come up with that term proportion and similar, some of those things that'll help us. And it's just a short amount of time, right, to gain some information that not only helps her, but also helps her students be more prepared to move forward with the lesson. Okay, so those are just 4 scenarios. Obviously, as you get in and you dig into these and you start using them, you're going to come up with scenarios that work best for your students and your class. But we do want to highlight the teacher notes. Okay, and like Dr. Bergwright said at the beginning, these I think are really the most valuable part, but they are certainly the hardest part to write and refine and select the most common error. It's hard to identify what is the most common error that we want to use, but we really hope that they're going to be useful to you because it's not just telling you what the error is, it's also telling you what you could do to scaffold that. What supports could you put in place for students? What are some instructional resources available to help you address those common misconceptions? So here's just one example, right? And this is again G.7, so still similarity, right? So here's the question that is on the quick check, right? So triangle ABC is similar to the triangle shown. Determine the side lengths of triangle ABC, right? There's of course multiple answers to this question, right? It's open-ended, get the students thinking, but using the teacher notes will help us identify maybe what we could do for students. Okay, so the teacher note starts with a common error. So that first sentence, generally for every teacher note, says a common error that some students may make is using the additive relationship to form the lengths of triangle ABC. So a student adds 3 to each side. Right, so they know they all change, but they're adding 3. Okay. The second sentence generally will include what it indicates about students' understanding. Okay, so this may indicate that some students do not understand that to create triangle ABC similar to the given triangle, the measures of the corresponding sides must be proportional. Right, so they're using the additive property instead of using the proportion. Okay, and then the last couple of sentences are potential instructional activities, right? So sometimes they're linked to things that are on the quick check at the top. Other times they're hands-on strategies. Other times they're just another question you might want to ask, right? So that just depends on the quick check. But within there, we try to provide different ways that you can help students, right, develop their understanding of that particular common and overcome that particular common error. Okay, so for this one, it was about copying, using some tracing paper, rotating it for the orientation. A little bit challenging to do virtually, potentially, right? But still emphasizing that idea about dilations and similarity and position of triangles, all of those concepts that students need to understand. Okay, so the next piece we're going to do, now that we've talked about the quick checks, you understand all of their the parts of them, all the components, and different ways you might want to use them, is we are going to address how you might use these in a virtual environment. Right, and I have been virtual teaching since March, right? So we have not gone back yet. We also had a summer session for students. We also taught from March to June, just like normal, as a blended learning high school. So we had a little bit different experience. So I have done all of these things, and hopefully you have too, or you might get some new tips tonight that might help you as you try and figure out how you might use these paper quick checks, right, in a virtual environment with your students. Okay, so one way, right, is to just use your division's learning management system. Right, so I know we use Canvas, you might use Schoology, Google Classroom, whatever you use, right, where students can complete the work and submit a picture, right? So that's a pretty simple way. You can upload the quick check, right, in its entirety. You can pick and choose what questions you want to use, post that as an assignment for students. They do their work and they submit a picture, right? We really want to see their thinking. So we want to see their work, or in this case, their diagrams and their markings and all of that to know where their thinking is. Of course, if you haven't done pictures yet with students, you will want to practice with them, like how to take a good picture, because I always have students who love to smile, which I'm glad to see their faces because I've never met them in person, but I want to see their work in that moment. So, so just kind of getting them to know how to take good quality pictures, or use their cell phone for pictures, whatever the case may be, that they can upload those for you to review their work. Another way, right, if you're meeting with students virtually, you want to do it in the moment, in the middle of your instruction as a warm-up, like we said, or exit ticket, or just in the middle of the lesson, right, you can post the question, right? So you've got your slides up, you're meeting with students virtually, so you can include those questions right in there. Okay, and then they can do their work on paper, right? Or if they have a small whiteboard potentially, and then they can just hold that up to the screen so you can review it. Right? I've also done that in chat, where I've been like, you know, put in chat what you got, and then we'll talk about some of the different responses. That's hard to do with questions where they have to explain their thinking, but then I can always call on some different students to say, okay, well, how did you get that answer? And how did you get that answer? And how did you get that answer? Now let's have a discussion about who is correct and why, and what the similarities and differences are between our work. So you can do it right within the moment, right, to help kind of guide your instruction along. Okay, some other ways, right, are the use of Flipgrid. So Flipgrid is a free platform where students can create videos, right? They don't need an account. You create your account and you give the students the link and the code to create. And I really have come to love Flipgrid in this virtual environment because my high school students don't want to talk to me through the screen. Maybe all of yours do. Please tell me your secrets. But I have trouble getting them all to talk to me, but they will all make me a pretty mean Flipgrid video, right? So they will, I will give them some problems and say, explain to me how you did this. And they'll talk to me through that video because they know I'm the only one that's going to see it. And then I can use that to kind of gauge my instruction moving forward. So it's a great, quick, formative way, and it's awesome to get to hear kids talk about math. I think that's the noise of the classroom is one of the things I know for me I miss the most about being virtual all the time. So that noise, at least I'm getting something through them. I'm getting to hear their voice and their inflection and kind of getting to know them through these Flipgrid videos that they're explaining their thinking. Another way is Google Jamboard, right? So if your division has access to that, that's a free platform in Google, and it's kind of like an interactive whiteboard where multiple people can be on at the same time, right? So you could take your question from your quick check that you want to use, load it into a Jamboard, right? Share the link with students, right? You can, it's kind of like going to the board. That's what I would relate it to as far as being in like a traditional classroom, right? Where here's the problem, I've drawn the diagram on the board, now you write on that and you mark it for me and you do the work there so I can see it. So it's a really helpful way, right? There's like different tools with pens and highlighters and markers where they can mark on the diagrams. It's very helpful in geometry, I find, because I need them to do something with the diagram, right? They can type on it, they can do sticky notes on it. I've done it in group work, I've done it just as a class, like here are the problems we're working on, who's gonna do this one, who's gonna do that one, and then go over the answers similar to what you might do in a traditional classroom. Okay, and then the last way, everybody's favorite way, is Desmos, and we're actually gonna go through this tonight. So I'm gonna turn it back over to Dr. Bird-Wright because she's gonna walk us through a full Desmos activity builder.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And so we're actually going to explore a quick check with G.5D in just a moment. So you'll pretend that you're going to be some students today, and we'll be able to see you in Desmos. And you know, we don't know everyone's familiarity with Desmos, but as you know, here with the VDOE, there is a Desmos activity log, and that a lot of that information was used to help us, again, some of those identified areas of support resources within our just-in-time quick checks. And so we're going to go to Desmos to, explore one of these particular activities. So I'm going to escape out of presentation mode for just a moment. I hope everyone can still see my screen. I think you can. All right. And so if you're thinking about Desmos, you've never created an account, you would end up going to teacher.desmos.com to create an account. It's super easy to do. You would hit that green button there and then create an account, either using maybe your school email address. Typically, that's the best way to use it. Many times they'll ask you if you want to log in with Google. Many of our school divisions are Google based, so you may even want to do it that way. But you'll get to this particular screen in which you can create an account. And once you've done that, you'll end up getting to what we call the teacher dashboard. And at the teacher dashboard, you're able to view the particular activity. And as you saw, the one we're getting ready to do shortly is our quick check on G.5D. And here you have the opportunity to assign a new feature here. You can assign to your classes and or assign a single session code. Desmos has now done an upgrade where you can actually assign to your Google Classroom. So those of you who are using Google Classroom, you can automatically assign those into your Google Classroom, which I think is another great step. Another piece in the teacher dashboard, you're going to be able to see what's called the student preview, where you as the teacher get an opportunity to see what the students are going to encounter when they get into the Desmos activity. What's great here is that all has been done is the just-in-time quick check has been transposed into the Desmos activity using Desmos Activity Builder. So here's the teacher. You'll be able to see those misconceptions that have been outlined from those teacher notes that Rebecca went over, located here in the student preview section. You're going to see each of the questions in this particular just-in-time quick check. You'll see it's only 3 questions. So what we're going to do in just a moment, you'll be able to view your dashboard. So I'll be able to see you in just a minute, and what Mike, I believe, or someone from the team, they're going to drop in the code so that you can get into the Desmos activity. And so what you'd be able to do when I get ready to view my dashboard here, oh, it's telling me to sign in with Google. How nice is that? Well, you will get a chance to see me sign in. How about that? Who knew we'd do this during the presentation? Look how easy that is. Ah, ta-da, there it was. You see how easy it was to sign in with Google. So it's right there on the fly. So there you go. That's a bonus we're coming for tonight. Now you're going to see, you're going to go to student.desmos.com or the link that's already been placed into the chat box there. Now, many times students, when you're assign a particular activity from the teacher dashboard, if you're unfamiliar with Desmos, what would happen is you provide them with the link. You tell them to go to student.desmos.com, or you'll see here on the screen that you can share that link with your students by simply copying it and pasting it into your learning platform system that you're using with your school division. A great thing about Desmos too is not case sensitive, so your students don't have to worry about capitalizing, and you don't even need the spaces. You can simply type in the code, and that's all they need. So now here we go. I see you all jumping on in here. Great to see some folks and some familiar names there. Hello. All right. So once we get into the dashboard, a couple of other great things you're going to see as a teacher. One thing I'm going to do right now is anonymize you. I think it's great to do that in Desmos because the kids are focused now in on, especially in a Desmos activity, they're not worried about now, am I going to be ahead of everybody else? Who's first? Who's going to finish first? They're concentrating on the math. Plus, if I am demonstrating this or in share screen mode, as you all may be in Google Hangouts or Zoom or whatever platform you're using, now students, you can monitor them, and every once in a while you can unanonymize them. I call it the Inspector Gadget button for those who are enhanced. You and I say that all the time. However, you can anonymize them. And the great thing about that is that these are famous mathematicians, by the way. So you'll be able to monitor students as they're working along. So I'm letting you play around in this for just a moment. And also I have the opportunity to pause you. Now, most of the time, if you all have used Desmos before, you get the collective, why did you pause? Because the kids love Desmos. They get into their learning and they get moving. One of the other items I think is powerful with Desmos, and those of you who've used it, you'll be able to then select various slides that you want to have some conversations about. As Rebecca talked about, you know, not every high school student is showing their face on that said camera, but this is a great way for students to explain their thinking. And then when you take the anonymized feature off, you can start to have some conversations with the students about why they selected or explaining their thinking. Again, that's the power of the just-in-time quick checks, because the students have to explain their thinking and their rationale for how they arrived at an answer. It's not that multiple choice where, you know, at this point in the game, many students have gotten used to SOL testing, multiple choice tests, and many of them are just reasonable test takers. But here you get the power of understanding their thinking, and without even having to using the Desmos activity builder here, using paper pencil, because you'll be able to see them type their responses here. Okay, so if I were to do that, this is a great tool, because then we can zero in on some of those responses. Okay, so that's just another great tool to use in a virtual environment, and I'm glad that you all had the opportunity to do that. I'm going to unpause you for a second. You can probably play with this a little bit later. I'll give you like 20 more seconds to get that last answer in, because some of you were chomping at the bit to get that last answer in. So go ahead and do it. Look at you. I see you now. 3 more people have responded. And that's a great feature as a teacher when you're looking here, because now I can see how many people have responded. I can see the progress of my students. As I'm looking at my summary, I can see if anyone's gotten stuck, if they haven't even started. That's going to give me a window into who I may need to maybe place into, for example, if you're using Zoom, into a breakout room to do a one-on-one and talk with them about why they're either not responding, or if there's some, again, another misconception or error that has been really identified or risen to the top based upon maybe where they may be getting stuck or what they have responded to in kind. So at this point, I am going to pause you. Look at you all going on to number 3. I'm pausing you now. I'm sorry, I'm pausing you. And now we're going to get back to the presentation here. Okay. All right. So I'm now going to actually turn it over to the VDOE team, and they're going to talk about the availability of the quick checks and what's next.
All right, well, great. Thank you, Angela. Thanks, Rebecca. They're just awesome. We've done a lot of work with them, and they just step up to the plate and really help to understand what the quick checks are all about and the potential that they have for you all as teachers in the classroom. So we are currently, and they've already talked about this, developing geometry and algebra 2 quick checks, and they are being loaded by our webmaster as we're getting them finished and created. So we're hoping to have them all uploaded and available within the next several weeks or so. So we hope that you can take a look out for those and visit the website as we get more of those up there. We also want to make you aware of an opportunity that you may be interested in. We're developing a users group of mathematics teachers throughout Virginia. And the users group will start meeting in January for geometry and algebra 2. And as a member of the users group, if you're interested in participating, you would participate in 4 webinars throughout the year. You'd use the quick checks with your students and then fill out a feedback form based on your experiences in implementing that quick check. And there is a small stipend that's available for your participation. So in the chat box, we're going to put a Google link for that, so that if you're interested in doing that, you can click on that link and fill out that form. and hopefully you can get involved in that particular opportunity. So we do have other committees working on other grade levels as well, so we would welcome you to that opportunity. We have had quite a few folks from all different divisions across the Commonwealth helping us with this project. You can see on the screen all of the different divisions that are listed. The ones that have a gold star next to those are the ones that are currently helping us with geometry and algebra 2. So we just want to take a little bit of time from the VDOE to thank everyone for all the work, those that are here, those that are not here, Rebecca and Angela. This has been a really big project, but I think it's been super beneficial to all the teachers and students in Virginia. So thank you very much. We have some links to different resources that you may be interested in. As we teach in this COVID-19 environment, there are some resources that may help you with addressing unfinished learning after COVID. The Council of Great City Schools has some great resources, and they have that one. That's a link that you'll be able to get to. Selecting math intervention content, and then restarting school. There's a planning for getting students to move forward that you might be interested in as well. So this is the contact information for us at the Virginia Department of Education, the Office of Student Assessment, and I'm Tina Mazzicki, and I work in the Office of STEM and Learning, and we welcome you to email us. We love to get your emails and be able to hear your questions, your concerns, and just to make sure that we're connecting with you out there in the school divisions. We appreciate all the work that you do. So there is a link in the chat box, just again for the just-in-time math quick checks, how to get there directly. We'll put that link in there one more time. I'll turn it over to the other VDOE staff that's here if there's anything else that you'd like to add, but I think we're about ready to wrap up. Mike, are we good? Oh, you're off in the islands. That's where you went.
Sorry, no, I couldn't get a mute fast enough. No, I think we are good. And if you have any additional questions, please, as you continue to stay with us, just drop them through the Q&A. And I personally want to thank Angela and Rebecca for doing a phenomenal job again, and really leading all of us through this the webinar, but also through the work that we've done throughout the summer since June. So a big thank you goes out to both of you. Tina, is there anything else that you want to add?
I don't think so. I think that we're good. Thank you all for joining us tonight. We hope that you're staying warm. We've got a little bit of cold weather now. Guess the holidays are upon us pretty soon. So have a great evening, everybody. Thank you. If you have any more questions, please put them in the chat box.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining us tonight.
All right, and then there were none.
Excellent job, you guys.
That took a while.
We are still recording. I've sent a message to Jason and Melody that